services and regulatory area for about 15 years, and I'm going to let our distinguished panel introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for still being around. I know it's kind of like the last stretch. I'm Aparna Menon from Barclays. I'm in digital marketing. I manage acquisitions for Barclays Consumer Bank across 3 lines of businesses: credit cards, deposits, and loans.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Smitha Mortis. I am the Chief Compliance Officer for Klarna. Klarna is a payments company based out of Stockholm. We also have a U.S. office in Columbus and in New York. I've been at Klarna for about 4.5 years. We entered the U.S. market 4.5 years ago. And before that, I was at PayPal.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Wu. I head up the U.S. Regulatory Affairs for MasterCard. Been with MasterCard for a little over a year. My former life was bank regulatory with RBC, with a law firm, and I started my career with the Fed in DC.
Great. As you can see, we have a distinct group of individuals who all have different roles in different kinds of companies. So we're going to get some perspectives from them. We wanted this to be conversational and interactive. And we are going to ask a series of unplanned and non-scripted questions to have this interactive dialogue. For all the panelists, the first question is, what is the most innovative thing your company is doing in consumer lending?
So I can kick off by saying that I wouldn't call it as one innovative thing. To me, it's a series of innovations that build on top of each other. So most of us, if not all of us, are data junkies for the most part. We want to collect as much data and information as we can. And I feel like every company goes through this different stages of data maturity. I think it's my hair that's messing with the mic. Different stages of data maturity, right? So the first stage is you gather as much data as you can. The next stage is when you build up your infrastructure, you have your different platforms, whether it is your onboarding platform, data management platform, customer data platforms, and so on, to synthesize the data and understand what's going on with it. And the third phase is when you have some kind of artificial intelligence to find out the best product for the right consumer at the right time. These are all series of innovations that happen, and we continue innovating in this space, but the ultimate goal of doing all of this is to find relevance or attain the most relevant offer to the right customer at the right time. So in our partnership space, for instance, we have our co-branded card partners with whom we get tons of data exchange. For example, the airline partners. From them, we get to know who is flying where. Are they taking the family along, or is these business trips, flying first class, how frequently they fly? All of that is data. Now what we do with it to identify which credit product or banking product do we put in front of them is where the innovation comes in. And there is a series of innovations that happen across all spectrum of technology to get to that final goal of being relevant in front of that right customer.
Samantha?
Yeah, so Klarna is a bank in Sweden. So we have a whole bunch of different products that are available in Europe. But I would say for the US business, it's our suite of payment products for merchants, right? So we can offer solutions for small retailers with lower AOVs, average order values. We can offer payment financing solutions for larger merchants as well that sell electronics, and they want to be able to offer that financing option for their customers. So I would say from an innovation perspective, it's really the products that we offer and the solutions that we offer for merchants. And secondly, the onboarding process for merchants is really quite seamless, and the integration process. So I think that's pretty innovative for us.
Tina?
Yeah, so MasterCard isn't a lender, so we don't actually provide credit. But we recently acquired a company that is an end-to-end technology platform that allows credit at the point of sale. So that kind of stuff I think is really interesting because you go out and buy your bed, you want to put, you want credit to buy that bed, and you can just do that at the point of sale. So that kind of thing is really interesting to us. And then in the more traditional credit card space, what we're doing, which is I think really innovative, is we're tokenizing transactions and making them safer within the credit card ecosystem.
Quick follow-up. Of all the different kinds of companies and or services and products that are out there, aside from your own institutions, what do you think is the most innovative product right now in the consumer space? Aparna?
So I'm going to pick anyone from the ad tech, martech space, since that's where my niche is. There is a lot of work that's being developed, especially in the AI space, for publishers from a DSP point of view. Quite a bit of personalization going on, not just creative, as well as audience and data management.
Samantha?
Yeah, so I think a lot of retailers are getting into the innovation, right? We've got Amazon Pay, we've got, I should name all of them, but yeah, so I think a lot of retailers are getting into the space now as well, not just the fintechs.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it makes very convenient for the customers when the retailers get into that space. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I've worked in consumer credit for 15 years, and when we first started, there weren't fintech companies, there weren't tech companies, there weren't other people offering ways to pay, so it is innovative. Question for you, Smitha. Sure. What are the biggest regulatory and compliance challenges you have to face in this space, and how do you manage them?
Well, that's a loaded question, right? I feel like it's the same. We've heard this from a few speakers already. I think it's really the gray area of the law, right? So I think we're coming up with, our business is always coming up with innovative products and solutions and user interfaces and marketing, and we're not sure what the regulations, speak as far as how to comply with them, right? So I've been in fintech for over 12 years, and I started at a company called Bill Me Later. I don't know if any of you know them. It was acquired by PayPal in 2008. And that was really innovative, and we kind of had to guess, like, how does, Reg E apply? How does Reg Z apply? When, how can we provide the disclosures, like, in a form that they can keep? There's a lot of gray area there. I mean, since then, there's been a ton of fintech companies out there, but there's no real, concrete guidance from the regulators. And there's some case law out there, but not a whole ton. And then there's always new products and services coming out. So for me, it's still the gray area of law that we have to kind of figure out and manage that risk. And the way we manage that risk is really just taking a look at the customer's perspective. How would a customer react when they see this? Is it clear? We always look at UDAP to see if there's any UDAP concerns. And then I think someone talked about this earlier, complying with the letter of the law and complying with the spirit of the law. I think that's a term that a lot of us are familiar with in fintech. We try to do both, and sometimes we just, make sure we follow the congressional or legislative intent of the regulation, which is technically the spirit of the law.
I don't know if any of the regulators are still here.
I know, I was a little careful.
They had some pretty scary panels. What's your top piece of advice about how to, I'm going to call it, play in the gray?
Play in the gray. Yeah, I think it's, so I asked my mom a lot. She's a 75-year-old consumer, right? So it's like, Mom, if you were looking at this product, what do you think? Would you understand it? Can you understand the terms if you were using this, user interface? Would that make sense to you? So that's one perspective. And then you got to look at it from, what is the business trying to, what is their goal, right? What is their ultimate goal in launching this product or service? And determine, you kind of have to balance that risk, right? Is it worth it? Is there a big, consumer harm? Is there a regulatory implication? So it's finding that balance. And we also like to push a lot of testing. So we'll launch a lot of things in test phases.
Yes. The beta's a great tool.
Testing, beta, right, yeah. So we do a lot of that. And then also we do focus groups, right? So we might present our products to certain focus groups to see, okay, what do you guys think? Did you guys understand this? Do you have any recommendations for us? So we do a lot of that, just try to kind of mitigate the risk with some of our newer products.
Thanks. Tina, banks, traditional financial services, or fintech? What do you think is the best consumer lending model? And will those two, the banks and traditional and fintech, combine to become one?
So I'm going to take the middle of the road here. Not a cop-out. But if you think about it, so just as an example, my husband decided to buy me a big present today and wanted to go, get a loan, he would get in the car, drive to the bank, fill out a loan application, and do it the traditional way. If my son, who's a poor college student, wanted to buy me a big gift, he would take out his phone and say to Google or to Siri, how do I get a loan? I mean, the consumer experience is different in each case, but that's what the person is going to look for. So I think there's space for both. The traditional method is going to work with the people who don't trust technology, who kind of aren't aware of how to go about using technology. But the fintech way of getting loans is growing with the younger, more savvy audience. And then ultimately, I think that it is going to converge. Ultimately, I think that fintechs will kind of grow their share more. Banks will lose a little bit and have to figure out how to play in the space, and the partnerships will probably increase. And then maybe at some point we'll actually get someone to apply for an OCC fintech charter.
I don't know about that. I shouldn't ask this question because I'm a Gen Xer, but you mentioned these two different demographics. Obviously, the older demographic is going to keep growing and then, keep getting older and then be gone. So what about, 20 or 30 years from now when all the consumers are super tech savvy and grew up talking to Alexa and having phones and the like?
Yeah, and I think at that point, banks will realize, well, hopefully before that point, or there won't be any banks left, they'll realize that they need to kind of adjust with the times and start going down that path, or partnering with fintechs that can help them go down that path.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, I've worked in traditional financial services and I work at a tech company now, and what's very interesting is all of the fintech companies that have come up in the last 10 years after the crisis, they all have banking relationships that underpin critical parts of what they do. So, they're doing things that are really innovative and different, but at the end of the day, the backbone of what they do is actually still banks. Aparna, how do you balance being creative, and I'll just say this again, maybe even aggressive, no regulators here, I hope, in marketing in light of, especially in the US, how intensely protective we are of consumers?
So just to level set the stage, I'm the only marketer along with these trained lawyers. So I have to be very worried before I say anything. Because there is this notion that marketers want to be super creative and flashy and somehow sell the products to the customers. And the lawyers and the regulators and the compliance reps are the ones who are the watchdogs and tell you that slow down, you're not supposed to do that. I think there is a collective responsibility for us to manage that narrative and change that narrative. And the reason I say that is, ultimately when it's all said and done, what is front and center is the consumer. Everything that we do, as long as it is focused for the consumer, and if our goal is to do right by the consumer, then the privacy is part of it. Their privacy requirements, we already make that front and center. Their data preferences, we make that front and center. Whether it is the kind of product you choose for the customer, how you talk about that product, did you give all the details or not? What creative do you use? Did you use any images that may have biases or any preferential treatment? All of that will become part of what you consider as a marketer for selection, even before you get in front of formal approvals and reviews and so on. So the core is you do right by the consumer, you do right by the customer, and they are front and center for every decision that you make. And then everything else, the privacy, the regulations, the legal requirements will all automatically fall into place.
Well, since it's all of us against you, I have another question for you. How do you make your attorneys or your compliance folks feel like they are part of the process? I think it's fair to say that most of us don't want to be seen as the person who says no or the roadblock, but How do you bring the lawyers in and realize their great value and all the wonderful things they can do to help your marketing?
And that's a great question, because what I said just before is a great pie-in-the-sky idea, but how do you tactically implement that, which is critical. So at Barclays, we do have a very collaborative environment, and we have numerous cross-functional meetings where all stakeholders sit across the table, and we review everything together. And it's an open kimono session where you can ask any questions you want, we'll answer it the best of our ability, and that's all up for you to debate and challenge and check. We also make sure that the lawyers have access, and we facilitate meetings with our media partners, with our media agencies. So it's not like there is a curtain between the lawyers and marketers are maintaining that gate. It's transparent. If you want to talk to our agency, any one publisher, let's get on the phone and talk to them directly. I also take a lot of effort in going ahead and training them whenever new technology is coming. In fact, I take personal pride, and I consider myself to be successful when I hear my privacy counterpart explaining to someone else, what does device graph mean? What does identity resolution mean? And when they are being the champions of these new technology innovations and ideas, that is a success for me, and that is a success for the whole company.
I would like to invite you to come to Shopify sometime and
Absolutely.
talk to all of my clients there.
Jody, if I could add to that.
Absolutely, Snehal.
So I actually supported the marketing team at PayPal for many, many years, and you guys are super creative, right? You come up with all sorts of fun things, whether it's, and then it challenges us as well. But how you were saying your privacy person's a champion, for us, it was always a success if our marketing teams were like, well, if this might be a UDAP issue because we have to be clear, and this, you know what I mean? So for us, it was like, yes, that's a win, Like, I think our teams are understanding the regulatory risks. So, I mean,
educating each other,
right.
And then you see their point of view. It becomes your point of view, not theirs.
Exactly. So it works both ways.
Yep. I mean, recently in a leadership team meeting, somebody suggested that we do something that was, of course, rife with all kinds of problems, and I was about to speak, and then he said, Jody, you're now going to say we can't do this because of these 4 things. So it does feel good when people hear you. Here's a question for the whole panel, and we'll start with Tina. What do you think is the most important consumer demand that you think lending products actually solves? And how do you think that we can make those products better to solve that consumer demand?
Wow. So I think consumers want speed, convenience these days, and in order to do that, we have to actually use the technology and create easy, frictionless ways to access credit. Now that has to be balanced with it. We've heard a lot of regulators today and yesterday. It has to be balanced with consumer protections. How do you make sure that a disclosure on a small phone screen is effective? I don't know the answer to that, but we'll have to figure it out. And then just making sure that consumers have the access, I think, is important.
Smith?
Yeah, so I would say that, a lot of, Klarna has done some studies, and there's actually, I've read a lot recently about young people, millennials. I'm a Gen Xer too. They're not using credit cards, traditional credit cards like we all did, right? So they're using debit cards, they're using their bank accounts. So I think what young, millennials, what we need to see more of is additional payment options that are attractive to this population, to the younger population, because ultimately they're going to be our shoppers, right? So. Yes, and obviously everything has to be mobile friendly these days, because who actually carries cash anymore? I don't even carry cash anymore.
I don't either.
So I pay everything with a card. So have everything mobile friendly and also e-wallet friendly, right? Because everything's digital these days.
What I'd say to that is I don't think the credit needs of the consumers have changed. The needs are still the same. It's just how banks enable those needs have taken a twist. So much like the example that Tina said before, in the olden days, if you had a need to work with a bank, you would dress up, you would drive to the bank, you talk to the Mike or the Jane at the bank, you tell them what you're looking for, maybe you're looking to buy a house, remodel a house, whatever it is, you explain to them, and then they tell you what are the products they have, and they serve you, they fulfill that need. Today, that dynamics has changed. I'm not looking for a credit line. I just want to remodel my kitchen. I'm not looking for a 70,000 bonus points, 2 times on every spent amazing credit card. That was a plug for Barclays. But I just want to go to Europe. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm not giving these signals directly to the banker and just sending these signals out in the market for someone to pick up. And you'll be successful if you're able to effectively pick up those signals, identify, qualify the user, and then present the right offer in front of them. So the credit needs are still the same, but being able to identify those needs at those exact micro moments is what's critical both to the service provider as well as the consumer. I was joking with someone earlier today that banks should be more like the Wi-Fi, right? You're always there, you're present. You have to have enough bandwidth to upload, download, do whatever transaction you want to do, secure, private, and all of that good jazz. But the moment, and people take you for granted all the time until the Wi-Fi goes down, and then everyone will hear about it.
That's a great one. Speaking of the Wi-Fi, though, and I think, Tina, you mentioned this as well, not all consumers have the best access to the latest smartphones or the best Wi-Fi networks. So I'd be interested to hear what each of you think about how you deal with inclusion and access, because I think you're right, the consumer demands haven't changed, but there are a whole swath of people who don't have the access to the typical credit products that other people do. Do you want to start, Tina?
Yeah, so I mean, financial inclusion is really important to MasterCard. And one of the things that we do is we've been encouraging prepaid card usage. People who don't have access to bank accounts can have access to prepaid cards. There are government agencies and other organizations that pay people through those types of products these days. But that's just one example of one of the things that we would encourage. And there's the whole kind of faster payments movement to help that lag, that check clearing time. If we can get people their pay faster, then it helps in that financial inclusion discussion.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of fintechs out there that are trying to address this issue, right? And I think the way Klarna kind of thinks about it is, we have different payment options, not just credit, right? So there's ways to extend your purchases over time, right? So if you can't pay for it all at once, just spread it out over time a little bit, right? So I mean, I think if we're able to offer some financing options for customers, I think we can try to at least meet some of the needs of this population.
One thing I would say to the original question you had was, the smartphones, they have actually helped to democratize access to the people who are of the lower demographics, who would not have otherwise had access to banks, especially in developing countries. There are instances where there are many countries, people don't have access to a bank, but they have a cell phone, and through that, banks are now able to provide service to them. So, actually it has made things better for the people who would not have had that access before. One thing I also would like to add is sometimes the citizenship initiatives that the banks do can bridge a lot of that gap. And one great initiative that Barclays has done is this is a citizenship group. They came up with this idea of bank on wheels, where they literally got a van, converted it into a bank, and drove to some neighborhoods in the city that we know were unbanked and took the bank to them. So there are some great citizenship ideas also that can bridge these gaps.
That's very cool. Another question for the whole panel. What's your prediction on the biggest innovation that's coming to the consumer lending landscape? I'll start with you, Smitha.
Me? Oh, great.
Sorry.
Well, you touched on it. We need to see, I want to see what's going to happen with this fintech charter, right? Like, I feel like we've kind of talked about this. Like, I know there was 1 or 2 companies that may or may not be applying for it. I've heard through the grapevine. So I'd like to see that happen and see what the regulators do with this charter. Also, we have all these, we have regulators kind of interested in this space. We've got the, Artificial Intelligence Task Force and the Technology Task Force. That was, it was just issued by the House, the opinion issued by the House, the resolution. So we'll see what happens with that. So I'll be really interested to see how the regulators help us with innovation. So if that's not really an answer, but that's
I will say,
kinda what I'm
I had
interested
a
in.
chance to talk to a couple of the AGs that gave their speech yesterday, and you know, New York sued the OCC before the fintech charter was actually even out. And so I have also heard that there are a couple of companies there, but the challenge, I think, is that you know that the moment you get one of these, then you're also going to have a lawsuit and you're going to be in court. So I would love to see someone go through it, have them do that litigation, and then the rest of us can apply.
All right.
Yeah, really anxious to see how the OCC FinTech Charter plays out. Once we get past the litigation, it'll actually be interesting to see how an entity like this is going to be regulated. Is it going to be kind of that full-on bank regulation, capital, liquidity? I mean, who actually wants that? I'm trying to picture the type of fintech that wants to hold bank-like capital. It's a little scary from a balance sheet perspective.
Maybe they won't require that?
Yeah, we don't know, right? It's too soon to tell.
I think they will. Is my prediction, but yeah. Aparna.
So I'm pretty bad at predicting innovations. All I can say is we might see some trends in the direction of making things more seamless and integrated for the customers, right? Again, in line with the changing trends, the changing customer experience and expectations. Just this morning, I was having a conversation with my colleague who went and bought an exercise machine. She didn't really need to finance it, but someone was chatting with her while she was buying it and then called her. 3 minutes later, she had a financing approved, installment set up, and the machine was ordered. So it became so seamless, she doesn't even really know if it was the company that sold the machine that did it all so fast, or was it the bank behind the screen, which was the bank behind the screen, doesn't matter. But it's seamless, it's painless, it's well integrated, and the consumer at the end of the day is happy to move on with their life, which is what's more important to them. So we'll see more and more these integrations and seamless handshakes between companies to ultimately make the consumer experience better.
I'm mindful that there's only one panel left that's between all of you and cocktails, and so we don't have time for questions, but we'll all be around if anybody wants to ask us anything, and I want to thank you all for these very insightful questions.